It was often debated in my dreams of Atlantis whether a primitive human would become like an Atlantean if given good education. Uran, the leader at that time, thought that it might be possible on a one-to-one basis because they were, after all, the same genetic humans. But he was cautious because he had a worry that it was a bit dangerous giving them the gift of knowledge when their society was already based on a warring, self-centered culture. He said he wouldn't be so concerned if they were actually peace-loving people already, but they weren't. The reason that Uran's people managed to adapt so well to their longevity and all their new knowledge was because their culture was already one of caring for each other, and they didn't fight with any other humans. They only ever defended themselves. They didn't eat meat, so killing animals was not in their culture, and certainly killing other people was not. So from this base, the people when they achieved their longer lives and had more knowledge, they didn't want to use their new technology to attack others or to use it for selfish reasons. They actually got pleasure from just scientific discovery and from the betterment of their own people. Sometimes they would even try to help the primitives with some knowledge or specific techniques, but this on occasion backfired, and many of our people actually got attacked. So it was quite frustrating. They were attacked purely because the primitive wanted to steal something, and it was ridiculous since our people would willingly have given them most of the things that they had wanted to steal in the first place, like food or jewelry. One of the universities was given the task by Uran of this great experiment on primitives, and it had to be only on a primitive that would otherwise have died. So they were taken, one as a baby, another at 5, at 10, at 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, and a very elderly 50-year-old. It was unusual for anyone to live past 35, but it did happen. And we were there just in time to find them and save them. Everyone except the baby were kept together in a specially built school. The baby, however, was billeted to a family who made the child their own. It was assumed that the child would integrate fully and be a normal member of society, but nevertheless, they were still part of the study. The baby was too young to ever have remembered where they came from, but they still never told the child a lie. They told the child where they originally had come from. I guess it was a type of control group, since the child was completely raised as a Tantal, as were the other children of Tantal. And it was interesting to see if the child acted in exactly the same manner. When they first arrived, the older ones were given the longevity treatment. Everyone was given the same schooling, except the baby, who was initially schooled normally at home. They were treated as all other members of Tantal society, with the following exceptions. They could not visit the other universities, nor could they travel to the great city. 10 years into the program, and 2 of them wanted to return home. They were the original 15-year-old female and the 30-year-old male. They didn't want to continue to be educated, so their wish was given to them. Their people, however, thought they had returned from the dead. One group assumed evil, and the person was killed by their priest in a sacrificial manner. It happened too quick for us to prevent it. The other was treated like a hero and was eventually made king of their people. The first response was not anticipated, and we were very upset that we were not able to retrieve her before they killed her. The two reactions were so extreme. The two cultures seemed so similar, but the reaction was so different. It was possible that the difference in reaction was due to one being female while the other male. But the people didn't understand it because gender meant so little to them. But after further study, it seemed that this gender thing was the issue. It was then agreed that any females in the study would never be returned to their own people, but if they did want to return to the primitives, then they would have to be taken to somewhere where they were not known. Interestingly enough, no other members of the experiment ever requested permanent return. One other did end up being returned to his people, but not because he requested it himself, but because he actually tried to kill someone. But that's another story, another unpleasant story, but hey, we'll leave that for another day. The experiment concluded after 40 years with 6 out of the 9 original participants. The participants were permitted to return to their villages to observe their original culture and to prepare a report on it. Each was given a year to either act as watchers or to live amongst their people in order to prepare their report. They were then required to present to Uran their findings and any recommendations. Such recommendations like should their people be given any extra knowledge, etc. The recommendation was unanimous that the primitives should only be given things that could help them develop peacefully. They weren't to be given longevity at this stage, but it should be reassessed if the culture were deemed to become truly peaceful. All participants requested full acceptance to our culture, to complete their education in full. They didn't want to return to their own culture. Acceptance was given, and they all completed their education to full adulthood or knowing. After a few years, one of the participants requested to be returned temporarily, but they did not stay above 30 years in their original culture before they returned back to Tantal. They wanted to go only to improve things for their people. No other issues were ever raised regarding the experiment. And it was one of the interesting ways that other races were introduced to Atlantis. Note, the people of Tantal/Atlantis were already multiracial before even moving to Atlantis, partially because they were so accepting of others, but mostly due to the atrocities of other primitive groups on Tantal women. But hey, skin colour was never of interest. Even Uran was of mixed race, and most Atlanteans were black or brown, but it meant no more than eye colour. After the overthrow of Uran, even more races were introduced. And as an interesting aside, one of those from the experiment that I just mentioned actually became very famous and was even recognized much, much later by the Egyptians as the god Bes. Anyway, the experiment was recognized as being inappropriate and in a way terrible. It was never repeated, certainly not in the era of Uran. However, under Bela, outsiders were occasionally included, and in the era of Jipe, it was much more commonplace. But those are stories for another day.